Hi guys, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you find this content informative, please subscribe to the channel for more updates. 7 NBA Hall of Famers. 7 legends who helped define what greatness looks like at the highest level of basketball. Men who won championships, built dynasties, changed the game forever, and spent decades competing against the very best athletes on the planet. Yet somehow, they all found themselves talking about the same player. And here's what makes that so unusual. Nobody asked them to. There was no marketing campaign, no coordinated promotion, no reason for these legends to go out of their way and publicly discuss a young player still early in her professional career. But one by one, they watched what CaitlinClark was doing on the court and they couldn't stay silent. Kevin Garnett saw something he believes most fans completely misunderstood. Shaquille O'Neal made a declaration that instantly ignited debate across the basketball world. Charles Barkley defended her when few people expected him to. Magic Johnson saw a story that looked strangely familiar. And Isiah Thomas identified a rare quality that can't be taught, practiced, or developed. What's even more surprising is that these Hall of Famers don't agree on everything. Some disagree about where Clark ranks historically. Some have different opinions about her accomplishments. Others view her journey through completely different lenses. But despite those differences, they all reached one remarkable conclusion: there is something happening with CaitlinClark that basketball simply cannot ignore. And that's where this story becomes fascinating. Because when legends from different generations, different positions, and completely different basketball philosophies all start saying your name, people pay attention. Not because they're being polite, not because they're following a trend, but because they recognize something that reminds them of greatness. The question is, what exactly are they seeing? Today, we're breaking down the 7 Hall of Famers who spoke up about CaitlinClark, and why their words may reveal more about her future than any statistic ever could. Kevin Garnett wasn't known for handing out compliments. Throughout his 21-year NBA career, Garnett built a reputation as one of the fiercest competitors basketball had ever seen. He demanded excellence from teammates, challenged opponents relentlessly, and never cared whether people liked what he had to say. If Garnett respected your game, it was because you earned it. Nothing was given. That's why his comments about CaitlinClark immediately stood out. When Garnett revealed that Clark had become one of his favorite players to watch, many fans were surprised. Not because Clark wasn't talented, but because Garnett wasn't talking about the WNBA. He wasn't comparing her to other women's players. He was placing her among the players he enjoys watching across the entire basketball landscape. For Garnett, the attraction wasn't just the deep three-pointers or the highlight passes. It was something deeper. He repeatedly pointed to Clark's creativity, her ability to see plays before they happen, and her instinctive control of the game. He described her style as almost freestyle basketball. That might sound simple, but coming from Garnett, it carries enormous weight. He spent decades competing against some of the greatest point guards in history. He understands how rare it is for a player to consistently stay one step ahead of everyone else on the court. But the most revealing thing Garnett said had nothing to do with scoring. It was about the physical treatment Clark received after entering the professional ranks. While many observers viewed the hard fouls and aggressive defense as disrespect, Garnett saw something completely different. He saw fear. In his view, teams don't go out of their way to stop players who aren't threatening. They don't build special game plans for ordinary talent. The extra attention, the physicality, and the constant pressure all pointed to one thing. Opponents already knew how dangerous she could become. And that realization leads directly to the next Hall of Famer, whose reaction to Clark sparked an entirely different conversation. If Kevin Garnett saw fear, Shaquille O'Neal saw something even bigger. And when Shaq says something publicly, people listen. During CaitlinClark's historic final season at Iowa, she wasn't just breaking records. She was rewriting assumptions about what was possible in college basketball. Night after night, sold-out arenas followed her every move. Television ratings exploded. Opposing teams built entire defensive schemes around stopping her, and most of the time, it still wasn't enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. As Clark continued climbing the scoring charts and eventually surpassed some of the most iconic records in NCAA history, Shaq delivered a statement that immediately ignited debate across the basketball world. He called CaitlinClark the greatest female college basketball player of all time. Not one of the greatest. The greatest. The reaction was instant. Fans, analysts, and former players immediately started comparing Clark to legends whose names had defined women's basketball for decades. Names like Maya Moore, Cheryl Miller, Diana Taurasi. Each had built extraordinary careers and left behind accomplishments that seemed impossible to match. Many believed the discussion was far more complicated than Shaq made it sound. But that's what made his position so fascinating. Shaq wasn't interested in qualifying his statement. He wasn't looking for a safe answer that would satisfy everyone. He looked at Clark's impact, her production, her influence on the sport, and made his decision. What makes the endorsement even more remarkable is where it came from. Shaq dominated basketball through power and physical force. His game was built on size, strength, and overwhelming opponents in the paint. Clark's game couldn't be more different. She wins through vision, timing, range, and anticipation. Yet despite those differences, one of the most dominant players in basketball history recognized something special. To Shaq, greatness wasn't limited by position, style, or era. And while his declaration created headlines everywhere, the next Hall of Famer would take a far more complicated and surprisingly honest approach to the CaitlinClark conversation. Charles Barkley may have had the most surprising reaction of all. Because unlike some of the other Hall of Famers, Barkley wasn't willing to simply agree with everything being said about CaitlinClark. When Shaquille O'Neal declared Clark the greatest women's college basketball player ever, Barkley pushed back almost immediately. He argued that greatness isn't measured by scoring records alone. Championships matter, legacy matters, the ability to dominate and win at the highest level matters. And he wasn't afraid to name the legends he believed deserved to remain part of that conversation. Players like Maya Moore, Cheryl Miller, and Diana Taurasi had built careers filled with championships, historic achievements, and sustained excellence. In Barkley's view, Clark's incredible scoring accomplishments didn't automatically erase everything those icons had achieved. It was a bold position to take. At a time when many commentators seemed eager to crown Clark immediately, Barkley chose honesty over popularity. But that's only half the story. Because while Barkley challenged some of the praise surrounding Clark, he also became one of her strongest defenders. As Clark's rookie season unfolded, controversy seemed to follow her everywhere. Physical fouls generated headlines, heated exchanges went viral, debates erupted across sports media about how she was being treated by opponents. Many people avoided the topic. Barkley didn't. He openly argued that Clark had brought unprecedented attention to women's basketball. More viewers, more media coverage, more sold-out arenas, more corporate interest. According to Barkley, those benefits extended far beyond Clark herself and helped elevate the entire league. That's why he found some of the hostility surrounding her so puzzling. His message was simple: you can disagree about where Clark ranks historically, but you can't ignore the impact she's had on the sport. And that's what made Barkley's position so powerful. He wasn't acting like a fan, he wasn't acting like a critic. He was doing what he's always done, telling people exactly what he believed. And while Barkley focused on Clark's present-day challenges, another Hall of Famer saw something even more familiar. He had lived through a nearly identical situation decades earlier. Magic Johnson didn't just see CaitlinClark as a talented young star. He saw a story he had lived himself. That's what makes his perspective so different from everyone else. When Magic entered the NBA in 1979, he wasn't welcomed with open arms. Today, fans remember the championships, the MVP trophies, and the highlight reels, but what many forget is how difficult those early years were. Veterans weren't interested in celebrating the arrival of a new superstar. They wanted to test him, challenge him, prove he hadn't earned anything yet. Magic remembers that experience clearly. And when he watched Clark enter the professional ranks, he recognized the same pattern almost immediately. The attention surrounding Clark was unlike anything the league had seen in years. Crowds were bigger, television ratings were climbing. Media coverage followed her everywhere, but along with the attention came criticism, scrutiny, and pressure from every direction. To Magic, none of that was surprising. He had seen what happens when a player becomes bigger than the conversation surrounding the sport itself. Suddenly, every game carries extra meaning, every mistake becomes a headline, every success creates new expectations. What impressed Magic wasn't that Clark faced resistance. It was how she responded to it. Rather than backing away from the spotlight, she continued to play aggressively. She continued taking difficult shots. She continued embracing the responsibility that came with being the center of attention. But Magic also offered something more valuable than praise. He offered a warning. He acknowledged that popularity alone doesn't create greatness. Attention can open doors, but only consistent excellence keeps them open. The only way to silence doubters is to keep producing year after year until the results become impossible to ignore. That advice came from experience. Magic had walked that path himself decades earlier. And that's why his words carried so much weight. He wasn't simply complimenting Clark. He was handing her the roadmap that helped transform him from a highly publicized rookie into one of the greatest players basketball has ever seen. But another Hall of Fame point guard noticed something even more rare, something that statistics alone could never fully explain. While Magic Johnson saw a familiar journey, Isiah Thomas saw something far more difficult to define. He saw the it factor. Now, that's a phrase fans hear all the time in sports. It's often used so casually that it loses its meaning. But when those words come from Isiah Thomas, they carry a completely different weight. Thomas wasn't just a great player, he was one of the greatest point guards in basketball history. A two-time NBA champion and 12-time All-Star, he spent his career controlling games against some of the toughest competition the sport has ever produced. He understands the position at a level very few people ever will. So when Thomas said CaitlinClark has the it factor, he wasn't talking about talent. Talent alone doesn't impress Hall of Famers. Every professional player has talent. What separates the truly special players is their ability to take control of a game before anyone realizes what's happening. It's the ability to dictate pace, manipulate defenses, and make everyone on the court react to you instead of the other way around. That's what Thomas believes Clark possesses. He pointed to her rare ability to see plays developing seconds before they fully unfold. While defenders are reacting to what's happening in the moment, Clark often appears to be operating one step ahead, already anticipating the next rotation, the next opening, and the next opportunity. And that's what makes her so dangerous. Many players can make difficult passes. Many players can hit deep shots. Many players can score points. But very few can consistently control the flow of an entire game. According to Thomas, that's the difference. The it factor isn't about athleticism, it isn't about statistics, it isn't even about skill. It's about influence. The ability to make everyone on the floor play your game. And in Thomas's eyes, Clark already has it. But if Isiah Thomas explained the mental side of Clark's greatness, the next Hall of Famer focused on something much more measurable. A number so small that most fans overlook it, yet so important that it may explain why defenders constantly find themselves one step behind. By this point, several Hall of Famers had praised CaitlinClark's vision, leadership, and competitive mindset. But one basketball legend focused on something far more technical. A number. A number so small that most fans would never notice it during a game. Yet according to Shaquille O'Neal, that number may explain why defenders constantly find themselves in impossible situations. The number is 0.43 seconds. That's the reported time it takes Clark to catch the ball and release her shot. At first glance, less than half a second doesn't sound extraordinary, but in elite basketball it changes everything. Think about what happens when a defender recognizes that a shooter is about to pull up. The eyes detect the movement. The brain processes the information, the body reacts and begins closing the distance. That sequence takes time. And against most players, defenders have just enough of it. Against Clark, they often don't. By the time a defender realizes she's shooting, the ball is already leaving her hands. That's why defenders frequently look a step late even when they're in good position. They're not necessarily making mistakes. They're simply fighting against a clock they can't beat. And that creates a nightmare for opposing teams. Play too far off her and she'll launch a three from distances most players wouldn't even consider. Pressure her aggressively and she'll use that attention to attack the basket or create opportunities for teammates. Either choice comes with consequences. That's why so many defenses appear trapped when facing her. Interestingly, some analysts and fans have compared this challenge to the problems teams faced against elite shooters like Stephen Curry. Not because Clark and Curry are identical players, but because both force defenses to make uncomfortable decisions every possession. And once those decisions start piling up, mistakes become inevitable. Which brings us to perhaps the most powerful endorsement of all. Because the next Hall of Fame recognition wasn't based on opinions, comparisons, or personal observations. It was based on something far harder to argue with. The record books themselves. Opinions can be debated. Comparisons can be argued. But records are different. Records don't care about narratives, media discussions, or personal preferences. They simply document what happened. And according to Magic Johnson, that's exactly why one of CaitlinClark's achievements deserves far more attention than it receives. During her rookie season, Clark accomplished something that placed her in exceptionally rare company. She became one of the very few professional basketball players ever to reach elite scoring and playmaking numbers at such a rapid pace early in a career. The achievement wasn't significant because it broke a single record. It was significant because of the names attached to it. Those names included some of the greatest point guards basketball has ever seen. Players who didn't just have successful careers, they changed the sport itself. Magic Johnson understood the significance immediately because his own name appeared alongside those historical benchmarks. And that's what made his reaction so powerful. He wasn't making an emotional argument. He wasn't trying to generate headlines. He was simply acknowledging what the numbers showed. For decades, basketball fans have used statistics as a way to compare players across different eras. While no comparison is perfect, certain milestones remain meaningful because they reveal how rare a player's production truly is. Clark's rookie numbers forced her into conversations that many players spend entire careers trying to enter. And perhaps the most remarkable part is how quickly it happened. Most young stars require years to adjust to the professional game, the speed, physicality. And expectations create challenges that take time to overcome. Clark arrived and immediately started producing at a level that demanded historical context. That's why Magic's endorsement may be the most important one on this entire list. Kevin Garnett saw fear. Shaquille O'Neal saw greatness. Charles Barkley saw impact. Isiah Thomas saw the it factor. But Magic Johnson saw something even more permanent. He saw a player whose name was already finding its way into basketball history. And once your name enters the record books, it becomes part of the story forever. When you step back and look at the full picture, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. These Hall of Famers don't agree on everything. They come from different eras, they played different positions. They built their careers in completely different ways, some dominated through physical power, others controlled games with vision and leadership, some value championships above all else while others focus on individual greatness and impact. Yet despite those differences, they all arrived at the same destination. They all saw something special in CaitlinClark. Kevin Garnett saw the kind of player opponents fear, not because of hype or media attention but because of what happens when she has the ball in her hands. Shaquille O'Neal saw a level of greatness that forced him into one of the boldest declarations of his broadcasting career. Charles Barkley, even while disagreeing with certain historical comparisons, recognized the undeniable impact Clark has had on the sport and the attention she has brought to women's basketball. Magic Johnson saw a familiar journey. A young star carrying enormous expectations while navigating the pressure that comes with changing a league. And Isiah Thomas identified something even rarer, the ability to control a game in ways that can't be measured by a box score. Individually, those endorsements are impressive. Together, they tell a much bigger story. Because Hall of Famers understand something casual fans often miss. They know what greatness looks like before the rest of the world fully recognizes it. They've experienced the pressure, the criticism, the resistance, and the expectations that come with being a transformational player. That's why their words matter. The truth is, CaitlinClark's story is still being written. Her biggest accomplishments may still be ahead of her. The championships, records, and defining moments that will ultimately shape her legacy haven't all happened yet. But if some of the greatest basketball minds in history are already paying this much attention, one question remains. What if we're not witnessing the peak of CaitlinClark's journey? What if we're only watching the beginning?
If you made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this changes everything, or are people overreacting? Hit the like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. It really helps push videos like this out to more viewers. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because things are moving fast and there's a lot more coming. I want to hear your take. Does this shift the balance, or will defenses find another way to respond? Share this video with someone who needs to see this, especially if they've been following this story closely. Turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when new content drops. If you've got a different perspective, drop it below. I read a lot of the comments and the discussions here are always interesting. Let me know what you think happens next, because this could go in a lot of directions. And if you enjoy content that breaks things down in a simple, engaging way, stick around. There's plenty more on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.